Ready. Brian's ready. We're all ready. We're
Yes.
back. We're back. We're talking about rock and roll today. We're talking about Mount Rushmore and rock and roll, the two American institutions. Yeah. Hey guys. I don't know. I don't have any other
Do
intro.
things we took
That's it.
from other people and
things
said,
that-
"Hey, they're now ours.
Yeah.
We
Exactly.
got it."
Exactly.
Exactly. It's
Um,
kind of the
all right.
American way.
We're back. I'm RJ. This is Brian and Megan. Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
We're gonna talk. Sadly, we don't have any voicemails to talk about today.
I can't imagine why people didn't want to call us after we went a little hard last time on the caller. I'm sorry
Yeah.
about that too. I appreciate you calling, and I didn't mean to go so hard.
Yeah. You know, in the words of a wise man, thank them for listening and move on. Take your hits. And we took our hits and then gave some hits back. And
Yeah.
so to our caller from last week, we love you. We appreciate your thoughts, your feedback. If you ever hear this, just know you're welcome back in the in the inner
I know. I
circle
hope
again.
they didn't stop listening. I do think it's helpful to get voicemails like that because then we have something to talk about. So I do really appreciate it. And now look, we don't have anything to talk about because we didn't get a voicemail that we could argue with. Kind of sad.
Brian, you know what I think about a lot? There's this documentary about the Ohio State Michigan game that I watch every year many times. And
I watched it for the first time this year. Yeah.
Oh,
did you like it?
sweet.
I did. It's I mean, I will get worked up for a historic mano a mano sports documentary. Like I cry every time I watch the 30 for 30 about the Baltimore Colts band, that the band that never died.
Yeah.
And these people that, like, they lost their football team, they lost their livelihood, but they didn't stop marching in that band. They kept going and they kept the spirit of the Colts alive for what, like 15 years until the Ravens came to Baltimore. I mean, one of the greatest moments. Sorry, I'm just going off on a tangent now, but this is your fault. There's a Cubs documentary about the curse of the Cubs, and they interview Ron Santo, my favorite baseball player of all time, and he was diabetic, and he lied about being diabetic so that he wouldn't get cut from the Cubs, and he played his entire career third base. And in the documentary, he's being interviewed, and he says, "You know how much I love this team." And he raises up his pant legs, and he's had both legs amputated because he's diabetic, and the prosthetic legs are blue pinstripes over white with the Cub logo. And he says, "I'm wearing my uniform every day of my life." And like, oh God. So yes, I love that documentary. You go on now.
Okay. Well, the only point I was going to make is that there's a point where Desmond Howard's interviewed, and he's from Ohio, and he won the Heisman Trophy with Michigan. And he said, every time I go to Columbus, still people just yell at me and say, "Fuck you, Desmond." And I say, "Thank you." And they say, "Go to hell, Desmond." And I say, "Thank you." And he does that like little bit for like 30 seconds. And that's how we all should be. You know?
Yeah.
Thank you.
That works.
All right.
It's cute.
We got a lot to talk about today. We are going to get into rock and roll. And thanks everybody for voting. We're going to get into the voting results. We're going to talk about the Mount Rushmore versions, which will be chosen by Brian. Man, we got so much. I hope to see some people out there on the road. I'm going to be Reprise is playing at Nectar's on the 17th of April, and in Broadbrook, Connecticut on the 18th, and then Iron Horse in Northampton the next day on the 19th. I'm going to be at a couple of those, so I hope to see people out there.
Oh, me too. Me too.
Megan too. Actually, go to
Not
see
me.
hang out with Megan, not me.
Yeah, I'll be in Northampton.
Megan will be in Northampton. So if you want to come hang out with Megan, come to one of those shows, but mostly to see them. They're great.
Yeah.
And we're announcing new shows all the time. So check out the website, repriseband.com. Megan, are there any new Osiris podcasts that we want to tell people about?
There is a new Osiris podcast, and it's women run. It is called the Femme Flock, and I got to sit down with them, and it was so awesome. They asked me to come on, and I sat down with them last couple weeks ago, and they were so organized, and they were so smart, and we had such a great conversation. I've never actually been in the jam world in a space that was just women, and it was really exciting. And I think we talked about some things I've talked about before, but then especially in the second half of the conversation, we really get into some stuff that is really interesting and something I've never talked publicly about before. And it was really fun. And I really hope people check it out. It's called The Femme Flock. It's an Osiris podcast now. And Jesse and Nikki are just amazing and really working hard. And it's great to have female voices out there. And I really appreciate Osiris taking them on and supporting that work. So I want to also really thank them for having me on. It was awesome.
Well, thank you for introducing, introducing their show to our audience by being their first guest on the. I'm sure people already know of them, but it was a nice, good timing to have you be the guest.
It really was. It was really fun. And, I got to talk a lot about Osiris on the podcast as well and talk about you two as well.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, that's nice. Look at that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
much.
Wow.
Talked a lot about HF Pod. Yeah, it was
Free
great.
promo. Amazing stuff. You're incredible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Free promo. That's what we're all about. But give us some reviews or some voicemails or something, guys, because so we have some stuff to talk about, or else we're gonna have to talk about what we actually came here to talk about, which is it's way too soon.
I was checking
Brian-
the reviews yesterday,
Yeah.
and I noticed that most of them came in on March 4th, 5th, or 6th. It's not like a month out, so you can see the exact date of when it is. It's not like recently. And I was like, okay, all of you guys listen to RJ's great command back in February.
Yeah.
We need another one. We need more. We need more thoughts. Even the nasty bits, we'll be okay with it. Even if we react in the moment aggressively, we're okay. We were trained on fish Twitter. We understand what it's like when you love something, but you feel like, hey, I got to give it a little bit of criticism. Just do it. It's okay. There's no one that's going to fight you except we might on air, but
Yeah.
it'll
Make us better. It'll make us
That's
better.
it.
I mean, one time someone made a comment about me saying or talking like a Valley girl, and it stuck with me. And I think I've gotten better at it because I've been really determined to try. So give us your feedback.
Not that
I don't think you're like a Valley girl. Come on. What's going on?
No,
here?
I'm much more of a New York City girl. Come on. They don't know me at all.
Not that Megan's still thinking about that or anything. So
Yeah.
don't worry.
Not that I'm holding on to that at all.
Okay, so Brian, one thing we got to talk about quickly, only in the context of our drafts, which we kind of borrowed from the Big Picture podcast, because on the most recent episode of Bill Simmons' podcast, which I think we both listened to, they do a draft of the kind of 25 most intriguing players of the NBA postseason. But his guest is Zach Lowe, who's back. He missed almost the entire NBA season after being laid off from ESPN, but now he's back with a Ringer basketball podcast. And so this overlap of Zach Lowe, Bill Simmons, and the Big Picture all happening right before the basketball playoffs. And I just want to know if you have any thoughts on that.
I have a lot of thoughts, and you're too kind that we borrowed it from the Big Picture. I straight up stole that draft idea from them. I listened to so many movie drafts for like a 6-month stretch in time. I just got caught up on all of them, and I was like, wait, there's got to be a way to do this with fish and make it really competitive and fun. And if we remove the keyword fun, it's still competitive, and it's a good time for other people, which we have a draft coming up next week we'll talk about. But Zach Lowe, man, I started reading him for the first time in 2012. He was like part of that birth of long form journalism that happened in the early 2000s, which really just meant you don't have an editor. But for someone like Zach, he needed the long form nature. He needed he would post like screenshots of plays as they were in development and then get into like the weeds of it. And as a basketball fan, it was like graduating with like your bachelor's degree and diving into grad school level basketball. And he has like such a passion for the game. He's written about like teams and eras that nobody thinks about and players that nobody thinks about, and watching his career develop throughout the 2010s and early 2020s to the point where he was, really one of the on-air resources on ESPN for their NBA coverage, right up there with Woj when he was still there, right up there with everyone on their, Stephen A. with all their like Friday night basketball crew. It was amazing to see this like total, guy who, total nerd writing out of his apartment about basketball as though it was the most meaningful thing in the world, reach the peaks And then obviously part of that peak is getting laid off from ESPN and now being at the Ringer where he has the opportunity to do almost anything, and he's going to be back for the playoffs. It's so great to have him back. I think that his writing, his coverage, I said this to you guys in a thread, but like to me, it impacted how you could write about music and how you could write about movies, and you could just pull all of these things together and thread it together in a really complex but really in-depth way. I'm so excited to have him back. I listened to that episode this morning on my dog walk, and just filled me with nostalgia but hope for the future as well, which is a fleeting thing right now.
Yeah, we're happy to have Zach Lowe back in the podcast world. Okay, Megan, is there anything you want to tell us about the song Rock and Roll? When did Trey write it, and when did Trey start playing it? Stuff like
Quite
that.
the transition here, my goodness.
you see
Yeah,
that?
just right into it.
It's 11 minutes, guys. We're going.
I'm proud of us.
We mentioned the word
Yeah.
rock and roll 11 minutes in. Take note, everybody.
Yeah,
Take
exactly.
note. Take note. I mean, I think this song is just such a great example of how the band is so good and so astute at picking the covers to hang on to. This song just harkens back to the roots of any American rock band, especially a band that likes to subvert expectations and embody a sort of punk attitude. And I think there's an argument to be made that Phish is a fairly punk in its refusal to adhere to like music industry standards and expectations. And I think anyone that has an obsessive love of music, this song just has to hit so deeply. And for me, as someone who grew up, listening to the Beatles and the Stones, this scratches an itch for me just hearing Phish play a song that I heard my parents play on the record player. But this song is obviously offloaded from Velvet Underground, and Phish first played it in Halloween in 1998, and it became a pretty regular part of the rotation after that. Either played at the encore as an exclamation point or kicking off a second set. That was a really popular place for it. It's been played 93 times, and 21 times has been on the Jam chart. So a little under a quarter of the times played, it's made the chart. Brian curated 7 versions for our HF Pod top versions list, and we listened to those. And Brian is going to be the one choosing this week which versions are going on Mount Rushmore. Brian, what does this song mean to you? It's your favorite cover.
It's my favorite cover. I remember reading about Halloween 98, and that part of the issues that people had with that show was that a lot of people hadn't heard the Velvet Underground's Loaded prior to that show, and so it was kind of this unknown moment. I know for me, when I first got the Live Phish volume 16, I think it is, where they cover Loaded, it was the first time I heard it, and I think that you introduced it brilliantly. Like, this song feels like it's a part of the Beatles, the Stones, classic rock lore, and it has that R&B, kind of roots structure to it. It leans into kind of the meta vibe of rock and roll as a belief system, as a trend, as a movement in a lot of ways. But then it also has that punkish side. It feels like New York City at like 2:00 in the morning. And to me, this song is, it's punk meeting indie 30 years prior, 20 years prior in a lot of cases. And so to hear Phish cover that, and lean into that, a band that tends to go pretty maximalist with some of their cover choices, but at this period in time, as they're approaching the end of the 1.0 era, are starting to understand and starting to explore who are the bands just below the surface that we should really be promoting. Like, they never really had a moment where they were able to push forward King Crimson or Genesis, these 2 bands that were really foundational from a songwriting and a song structural standpoint. But like the Talking Heads and the Velvet Underground are almost perfect encapsulations of what Phish was going for and what they achieved by the late 90s. In terms of what I love about this, like, this song rips right out the gates. Like, that riff, you immediately hear it and the entire place swells up, no matter if it opens a second set, no matter if it comes midway through. I've seen it as the second song of a show multiple times, actually. I've seen it as an encore. Wherever it's at, it just hits and it kind of elevates a show in that standpoint. Page vocals, I'm here for pretty much any vocals from Page, and I think that these are some of the strongest he's ever done. The chorus, everybody's yelling. every single person is yelling, everyone is happy during the chorus. And this does something that we may talk about this. Well, we probably will. Like it has this pathway into a jam that I think is similar to Down with Disease in the sense that when this song
Hmm.
is happening, when it is exiting, you get this sense, and maybe it's the riff and the way that the riff can be distorted, but it gives you a pathway into a jam segment that feels a little bit easier than certain other songs in their catalog. And it feels like for a period in time, this was without question one of the most reliable songs that they could lean into, make a statement song wise, and then know that they had a reliable jamming platform for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it's the tempo, like in that it's similar to Down
Hmm.
disease. It's easy to kind of go into full throttle when you're already like up tempo. But
Right.
yeah, it's interesting. Um, yeah, I don't want to rain on Brian's parade about this song, but I will say that I
Don't hold
think.
back. Tell us what you think.
Well, I was thinking about it today because it's not my favorite cover that Fish does, and I think part of it is like look at the jam chart, like this song is it's it's when it's done. I mean, it like there hasn't been a jam chart entry since 2013, right? So maybe it's more of a recent thing because I do think in like the late 90s and even like 2.0, like you have 93 versions and what 20 of them are 21 are on the jam charts. So that's fine. That's like a pretty good percentage, but in the past 10 years, like once it starts, it's just like, do I want to sing along rock song? Like, sure. Yeah. I mean, who doesn't,
Yes, RJ, you love songs. You love
I do
songs.
love song, but I'm saying as like I don't ever hear it. And I don't ever hear it and think like, all right, here we go. We're in for a ride. It's like, we're going to sing.
Her life
Yeah.
was saved by rock and roll, or there must be something more than this. I'm just trying to figure out
Exactly.
which is the
Exactly.
line that we need to be yelling out. No, hold. You are absolutely right, and this is, I have it noted here. This is the odd reverse jammer. So
Mhm.
many songs that did not jam in early Fish history have somehow evolved into a jam vehicle. Obviously, Chalk Dust Torture is the classic example, and it is funny because when I built this whole plan out for this year of what songs we would do, I was like, well, we got to start early with a cover song, just to like level set that we're not just doing originals. Like this is a Fish song, if you will, for all intents and purposes. And then I went through and put in the versions on our overall long list where we would make our Mount Rushmores. And I realized as I was doing it, like shit, like after 2013, this song drops off and just becomes kind of a encore. It kind of becomes like a second set closer, all the way to the point that like it's not really played that often anymore. And it's kind of this
Yeah.
like very rare thing that I would love for the band to rediscover, because for a period in time, this was one of the most important songs that they had in their arsenal.
Yeah, and I think there's an argument to be made too where not every song can jam. I mean, it can, and I hope they do, but Fish doesn't always do that. And this is a song I'd rather hear if they're gonna play a song and not jam it. Like, if they're not gonna jam a song, I'd love them to play Stones. I'd love them to play Velvet Underground. I'd love them to play the Beatles. So, for me, I'm okay with that. Like, I love this song as a song. I'd rather it jam, but I'm okay with it if it doesn't, if that makes sense. Like, there's so
Yeah.
many songs that they play that don't jam that I'm like, "Okay." But I'd rather hear this than fucking Rogue A, Like, there's a lot of songs that they play that don't jam that I'd rather hear this.
Hmm.
Always with the Rogue shade. I'm just looking at the stats. So the last version I saw was 7:28:17. It ended the second set, came out of backwards down the number line, which was the backwards down the number line. I was behind the stage and I watched every single one of you losing your mind. And I was like, you're all liars. I see you all on the internet talking about how you hate this song. I can see you all smiling and dancing. That's for a future
It's one
Mount
of my
Rushmore
favorite
episode.
favorite live moments of all time.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Okay.
But that was the last time I saw this. It has
Okay.
been played 11 times since then in 8 years, only one of those times was not a set 2 closer or an encore. So
Yeah,
something
yeah,
has changed.
it's not in the spot it used to be. Like it would never open a second set now. It would, it's in a different place for sure. The gap's pretty big, right? Like I think the gap right now is like it hasn't been played in like 27 shows or something.
Yeah, the last show was 8/3/2024, so night 2 of Deer Creek, and prior to that was 8/25/2023.
Yeah.
Um, so like, yeah, we're in a pretty decent break, and we haven't had a second set opening version since 10/23/13 in Glens Falls. Really great show, but not a huge rock and roll either. That didn't make our large list.
Yeah, that's not where Trey goes right now when he wants to play something big.
Yeah. But that doesn't take away from anything. I'm just saying that, I noticed that. And I'm not
Would
gonna
this
be
be
mad.
like
I'm gonna be mad when
Would
they
this
play
be
it.
like if someone was trying to petition for like William McKinley to be on Mount Rushmore at this point in history? Is that kind of like us talking about this song? Is that what this is?
Well, sorry, I just want to respond
Sorry.
to your earlier slander about Moore, which is that I think that covers have a different
Slander.
have a different purpose than originals, like so to me,
True.
I think
I agree with that.
it's totally fine that this does not jam. But when it starts, I'm not like I'm personally not going to be like this is the best moment of my entire life or show.
But you
I'll
are
be
when Moore plays? And
I
but I
really
think
I love more. I think yeah, I
but I
mean
think what
whatever.
Brian's saying though is like true about the comparison between Moore and this song because
Yeah.
it's an uplifting, feeling of like we're in the right place. We're
Yeah.
communing about rock and roll together.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm down I'm down for it to exist for sure.
Okay,
I'm
great.
here for the more episode where we debate the worth of like Trey's riffs and like how much he like belted out. There must be something more than this.
Yeah.
Go to
I mean,
the tapes to see like where was the crowd really reacting and like love and
Yeah.
light type of thing.
Dude,
Go
I'm
to the
into
do
that.
it.
tapes.
Let's
Did
do
you
it.
see Evie Dude's comment that rock and roll should take Golden Age's spot for a bit? What do you guys
I
think about
did.
that?
Well, it's
Hmm.
interesting because I don't totally disagree. We're going to talk about a version of rock and roll in today's episode that was played in a run of shows where Golden Age was played for only the third or fourth time ever, at a time when Golden Age was starting to percolate up and emerge as kind of this. It's something I hadn't thought about until just now. Like Golden Age has almost taken its slot.
Yeah.
It's like this new New York City punk, indie, whatever band, TV on the radio. Like they're kind of a lot of different genres of music all smashed into one. And this song that has like kind of a meta take on things has now become what rock and roll once was for Fish. I don't know if the band is thinking about it on that sort of level, but I could see argument be made that like Golden Age takes a little bit of a step back, rock and roll takes a step forward, same vibes, big jams. Come on, who's complaining?
I'd be down for that too. I like the song better.
Can I
I like
just
rock and roll better.
can I say something that's slightly controversial, especially in this forum?
No, you're not
Yeah.
a podcast. There's no controversy allowed.
I think Goose does such a better job at choosing covers than almost any other band. And I just want to put that out there for you guys.
Goose is
'Cause I
very good at choosing covers. I agree.
I think they like it's a mix of like contemporary and classic songs. It's songs that like fit well with their vibe. I think Fish does too, but I think like you said, Brian, at the beginning, and I only mean this in the context of like being a kind of an up and coming band, which Fish was once. It was like Zappa, Zeppelin, you know, Stones. Like they weren't playing like what if Fish had played some of those songs that were popular in like 1989, or
Yeah.
like an early 90s song, or like take a like a just kind of an obscure song and make it their own. I don't know. I think that's really
Well,
interesting.
it always felt differently when they did it. Like, when they did that summer of covers, it it always felt more like a novelty for
Yeah.
Fish,
Yeah.
And like I think they're really good at picking covers that last. I think especially their Halloween albums have proved like really great ground for that.
Yeah.
But I do think that it always felt funny when they played contemporary music. I don't know. It just felt
Yeah.
weird where I think like, Goose, you think of a song like No California, which I'm obsessed with. That cover is just, it's so obscure and it's so perfect for them. I know Brian might disagree, but I do think that it kind of hits what they're good at doing. But yeah, I find that interesting. I haven't really thought about that enough to know if I think they do it better than a lot of other bands, but I do think Goose does a nice job of it.
I think Fish sounds like Fish in a way that made it hard for them to take on different sounds and different
Yeah,
bands in a lot of
I think
ways.
that's it. I think you're right.
Which is, I think, why, like, when they decided to cover a full Beatles album, they chose the White Album, which is like the
Yeah.
Beatles trying on a bunch of different sounds and a bunch of different ideas. I think Goose is both very, very, very good at picking cover songs and very, very, very bad at picking cover songs. And I think Fish, are they bad at it? I don't know. I don't know of any Fish covers off the top of my head that I really don't like. There are some Goose cover songs that I find downright offensive, but this is not a Goose podcast. Maybe we'll bring this discussion to Ryan Storm. And
To
You
our-
love the
to our-
Ghostbusters rap. Come on, Brian.
Yeah, no, nothing has made me question whether or not I made a wrong decision to dive into a band than when they hint at and then jump into the Ghostbusters rap. What a cool moment, guys.
Well, I mean, what would you rather have, the Ghostbusters rap or the Big Ball Jam? I mean,
Well, the Big Ball
take your
Jam's not a
pick.
cover. The Big Ball Jam is like
I know.
serves an
Maybe
actual
worse.
I'm just talking about
Worse.
offensive. I'm just talking about offensive moments.
It's
All
so
right.
offensive. Hate that shit.
Compare it to like 16 different Mike Gordon songs, okay?
Exactly.
All right, Brian, are you
Oh,
ready?
poor Mike.
Are you ready to do the honors? Are you like? Do you feel like you can do it?
Oh yeah, I'm totally ready. Are you
'Cause
ready?
it's
For
time,
Q.
and I'm sorry I made such an abrupt jump, and now it's 27 minutes in, and we're about to do our first Mount Rushmore pick, and it feels like, I don't know. Do you guys want to talk about something else? Like
No, I'm really
Movies?
curious. I'm really curious
We talk
about where
about
Brian's
movies?
going. I'm really curious.
I just want to comment on right after you made that you jumped into something where I didn't want to interrupt you. Shocking, I know. But Forbin77 just noted there was a hard cut, and it made me think that it was actually more fitting because we were talking about Zach Lowe and his breakdowns of NBA plays, and it was like you cut across the middle. Nobody was seeing you come there. You just
No.
got the ball. You shot a beautiful mid-range jumper. It was amazing.
It was already the second time sports had been discussed on the pod, so I
It's
felt
true.
grateful that we were exiting the talk. Not that I'm ungrateful to listen to that because it's interesting.
What other times
but-
have we talked about sports? This is interesting. You have this like tracked down to a science.
No, in this episode, you were talking about sports before documentaries. No, I don't have a running catalog. Brian, I can barely remember what happened today. I definitely can't remember what we talked about on the pod.
Brian, you
Don't
know
worry.
who does a lot of really good cutting? The Cleveland Cavaliers, as I learned today from Zach Lowe.
They do. I still don't know. Similar to I
Sorry,
don't
Meg.
know if we're gonna get
God damn
a
it.
similar to I don't know if we're gonna get another rock and roll type 2 version. I don't know if the Cleveland Cavaliers are actually gonna contend for the NBA title. I think this is a very nice season that is gonna end in horror for them.
Horror.
VT to boot asking, is it time for the Bulls? Oh my God.
Don't get him started.
Don't get me started. Okay.
Let's
get me started here.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Let's do it.
So sorry, Bryce. Rock and roll debuts on 10/31/98. And I'm just trying to pull up this information here. I've lost it now. Never mind. And it kind of lingers for the next 2 years. And it's fun. There's a couple cool versions throughout 98 into 99, but it really comes to a head with a version that has to go on this list. Both for like there are 4 minutes of nearly perfect groove jamming, which we're going to talk about, followed by 15 minutes of shit. We have to play until like 7:00 in the morning. What are we going to do? Oh, let's just do washes of sound. And it feels like the first kind of like reset and break of Cypress in some ways. This is the Cypress version, obviously, 12/31/1999, 30-minute monster shortly into the show set, the main set of Big Cypress. This is bouncy and contagious. It's airy and atmospheric for the back half. This version, I feel like, is the best way I can describe it is Lou Reed's fantasy for this song, because this takes the idea of rock and roll and breaks it down while also still like raging in a really unique way. Like, but they still figure out a way around 12 minutes. I've got it noted at 12:40 to break the jam down into a rhythmic but like still shimmery groove, all built around John Fishman on the cowbell. Like, this is as much of a more cowbell segment as we've ever gotten in Fish. And like when you hear it, you just can't help but like your shoulders start to move a little bit and you like get this big smile on your face. And it goes on for almost 4 minutes. And the band just sounds happy. They sound higher than life. And it feels to me when I listen to this version like they've unlocked what rock and roll can be. It's not just a raging solo. It has more to say. As rock and roll evolved throughout the latter half of the 20th century, you can hear that happening in a microcosm here. It then totally disperses and moves into this very atmospheric segment from like 1645 to 2550, roughly speaking, before building back up again into the chorus. We're probably going to talk about that segment because there were some shots fired about it in the group thread. But I don't personally see how you have a list of greatest rock and rolls without this, because of what it accomplishes, because of the contagious factor to it, and because of the importance of this being, one of the crowning achievements of Big Cypress. But I'll yield the floor for a few and let you guys share your thoughts on number one, 12/31/99.
Well, Megan, can I just
Go ahead, RJ.
respond to Brian's slander? No,
Sorry.
That's just facts, RJ. It's actually not slander. It's just facts.
We're gonna have to get some
Slander.
lawyers involved. I mean, so we, starts around 1:30 in the morning and is part of Fish's most famous concert. So like, great. Like, put it on there. It's got to be on there. I think the slow and spacey part, it's kind of in the middle after the like bluesy jam is cool. I think there's some cool moments. I think it kind of drags for a while. And I think looking at this as a going back, and I've listened to it a bunch of times in the past, but more in the context of this long set. And I think you're right that it has to be there. I think there are some interesting and good notable moments, but I also think if you look at it on paper and you see like 30-minute rock and roll, you're expecting something maybe more propulsive, especially in the context of the like end of 99. But also it's 1:30 in the morning at Big Cypress. So like, all bets were off in terms of what they were going to do. But I agree with you that it has to go on Mount Rushmore. I just don't. It's not my favorite version, and I think I was slightly surprised when I listened to it out of the context of Big Cypress that I wasn't as excited about it as I thought I was. This is like basically the whole pod is just me saying that I don't like stuff. So
I mean, this
thanks.
is a real shift. This is a real change of roles here. I like it.
It's a hard cut.
It's a hard cut. Not having the archival release of this really affects your ability to fully understand this version. I think it's a crime that we don't. But to me, this version is so fluid, and each of the three sections are really patient. And to me, it really captures that nowhere to go for days Big Cypress vibe, which I think is so awesome. And I really love that quiet section. It swells, it pulses so softly, and I love how it gets really dark, and it gets kind of build is so driven by Fishman and swirls into that like dark fiery ending, and like it was all right quotes the end really faintly. I love this version. I really want to hear it archivally released, and I'm glad it's on our Mount Rushmore.
I don't think that RJ's making incorrect points. And I think that Megan's call for this to be released more than 25 years after the fact is like What is
What are we
this? Like,
doing here? Your
what are we
biggest show of all
doing?
time. You don't have your
What are we
biggest show of
doing?
all time on your app? That's insane.
Are we waiting for all residuals to just like be gone and in like the 23rd century we're
Do you know
gonna
that
release this?
someone on Blue Sky, I posted this and someone wrote and said, I emailed Kevin Shapiro about this and he said that they'll release it when the band is ready. So
That's awesome.
they're
What a great
not
answer.
ready? What
I think it's like an insurance policy. That's like the only rationale, you know? It's
I
like,
think you're right. I
against
just
right?
what? Like,
well, I
No
think
idea.
the one thing I want to tread lightly here, but some things happened at Cypress. Okay. Like Cypress was an all-night event, and to make sure that you could stay up all night to perform for all these people took some feats of strength. And
mhm,
the one wonder I do have is this is around the time that a set ends in a normal show is during this rock and roll. It's about 90 minutes. Where's the band's head at when they realize like shit, we just played a full set of music and we have like to do this 4 more times? Um And so I do wonder if like part of the length of this was allowing themselves the ability to recharge. Because
yeah.
there are other jams in the show where that clearly happens. Um, that said, I don't want to be pushed into a corner where I have to talk crap about a version that I have walked down the streets of foreign cities blasting in my ear going like this, being like, "Fuck, this is the happiest music I've ever heard." It's a great, great jam. Um, does it stretch on a little long? Sure, but that is also kind of the deal with Late 1.0, which we've explored in a number of other series, and we will continue to explore until the end of time because that question of what happened at the end of 1.0 is kind of one of those unanswerable, well, it is answerable, but unanswered questions that we all kind of are constantly thinking about.
I'm kind of
So,
here for the meandering lately. I mean, I told you this in our text thread, but I've just been into the space. I've been into the exploration, into the patience, into the one thing that is like so amazing about 4.0 fish is that we've talked about this, but they can just drop into a jam so quick. They never spend any time having to meander now, and that makes them very sophisticated and clean and fascinating. But sometimes I just like a little bit of wandering.
Yeah, that's
well,
fair.
let's
I mean, I
find
think
go ahead.
well, I was just gonna say, well, first of all, if you haven't listened to the series about Big Cypress called After Midnight, where Trey talks for hours and hours about Big Cypress, you should because it's really fun.
I
Um,
love the mic drops from you, my god. You know, I
well, I'm just
produced a
saying.
series on
No, I didn't
Big
say anything about
Cypress. It's
me. I just said you should listen to it. I'm not.
If they haven't
I
listened to it and they're listening to this, I'm confused.
yeah. Well, I just wanted. It's called plugging the material that you create, Meg. Come on.
It's so good.
Come on. But I also just want to say, at first, for whatever reason, for this Mount Rushmore series, I'm going for like fucking blow me away or get the fuck
Yeah,
out. If we're talking about
I
Mount
get that.
Rushmore, so like this, like there's cool segments thing. Come on, you're out. Get out of here. I'm not looking for cool segments. I'm looking for fucking. Let's go, start to finish. So that's what I'm going for. But I'm glad that we all have our own, you know, everything.
Opinions.
Yeah.
Everybody's got opinions. Let's
Yep.
take the theme that Meg was just talking about, though, the wandering nature and the 3.0, 4.0 nature. Because I had to make a very difficult decision here, guys. Okay?
Yeah.
So
Sure you
curious.
did.
I'm sure you did. My original list went from 12/31/99 to 12/2/2003, a jam that I hold so dear. I still remember the first time I listened to that, um, smoking a tiny little pipe in my dorm room and like blowing it out the window when the soundboards dropped, and my friends and I downloaded it in our dorm. Um, Putting the towel under the door type of thing, like very classic college experience. Um, And that version goes into like this like Mike nitroglycerin tone that he played throughout 2003, and then moves into this just very happy, but like that tone Trey has, it's so dirty, it's so raunchy, and like it is the yang to all of the yin of 2003. Like you get these dark, dismal places throughout 2003, and this is like joyful, beautiful, uplifting chords. But as I thought about it, there's another version that I think, unfortunately, does what that did better, which we will talk about,
Hmm.
which meant that there was a jump here from 12:31:99 to 8:5:11 from the Gorge. Um, this is in the same realm as the Light that Meg talked about last week from
Wow.
Tahoe 2011. This is
Wow.
the storage jam being unlocked. The theremin is like making its appearance back in live fish setting, and out of nowhere Paige gets up, like the whole stage was red and smoky and there was nothing around you because it's the Gorge, and the sound is just emitting from the stage. I was at this show. I remember like being like, this is probably the greatest moment of my entire life right now. Um, this is like, along with the 10, 20, 13 tweezer, as close as I feel like Trey has ever gotten to sounding like Ira Kaplan from Yola Tango. This version grooves, it descends into the netherworld, it reemerges, it figures out a way into meat stick that's really inventive. Um, I put this on here because we have to absolutely have a early 3.0 version of this song. If you look at the jam chart for rock and roll, um, you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 409 versions, 2010 versions, and 2011 versions. And I think that's the most out of 21 entries here total. That is the most, like the most packed space for rock and roll. And there's some great versions in here. Great versions that are being left off, like 8/8/2009, 11/21/09, 6/26/2010, 6/7 2011. But this version is kind of the culmination of all of those, in that it doesn't open the set, which it was wont to do during that period in time, but it really kicks off the set in earnest, and it takes the kind of propulsive groove and celebratory groove that came out of so many jams and was part of the reason I said earlier that this song has such a great entry point into jamming, similar to Down with Disease, but immediately turns into dystopian, weird, sci-fi space mindfuckery textures, the likes of which we were not hearing from Fish in August or before August 2011, and that many people up until that point in time wondered, could they ever get this dark and this weird and this abstract again? And this jam not only solidified for so many of us that yes, they can achieve this again, but also for this song, really showcases what it can do, kind of in the argument that RJ is making, that like it had 30 minutes to do all this stuff in the Cypress version. It kind of shrinks that down to 20 minutes and gives you even more in some cases, and really showcases kind of the diversity of jamming. I think you said at some point in our text thread, the sophistication of jamming during this period in time. You really just hear a band that is tapping into something that is next level for them. So 8/5 2011. Whew, amazing stuff.
I am so shook by you skipping 2.0. I'm just like shocked about
Yeah,
that.
it's crazy.
And it's going to take me a while to like process that. I got to be honest.
We're gonna
Really
have to be
crazy.
honest in the Mount Rushmore series, you know?
There's a couple
Yeah.
that I can't I'm just we're just gonna have to talk about that
Let's
you
do
Yeah.
it.
that you passed over, but we will in due time.
Yeah, we will talk about them. This version though is definitely was on my list as well. This Gorge from 2011. It's unbelievable. I love that watery section that it gets into like halfway through. It just it's so good, and Fishman is like driving it, but it's really softly but urgently. It's so great. The rhythm section is just unbelievable in this jam, and that deep groove that Mike finds, it's so good. And the super spooky ending. I didn't want this jam to end. I've listened to this jam a lot this week. It's fantastic. Definitely on my list as well.
Yeah, and they, this was the first show after a break of a month
Mhm.
after Super Bowl.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, this is so
It just
like,
came back.
and they
ready.
came back like with the storage jam. They were like, let's go.
Yeah.
It's with us now.
Yeah, there's like some minor key chord jamming that Trey's doing in here that's really cool. And it's all, yeah, it's weird and spooky and all the things you already said. Really, it's a good version. It's a really good version.
Tell me what I missed. What did I go past?
Well, we have to give ours. So what I think when
Yeah,
we give
we'll do it
ours,
then.
Okay,
yeah.
we'll do that. We'll do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
or else we're just going to talk about all of them because there's not that many anyway, which we could also do because it's our show. We can do whatever we want. But the thing that we have to do is take a break. So we'll see you in a minute. All right, Brian, you skipped over 2.0. You skipped over early
Shocking.
3.0. You went straight to 2011. Where are we going next?
So this is kind of where we get similar to what you did with Hood, similar to Meg's take on Light. We get a sense of the era where a song is at its strongest. And I think that it is I think that this is the point where we see rock and roll during this period in Fish history is one of maybe 3 or 4 songs that they know in a pinch they can go to. If they're walking on stage for set 2, what do we open with? Okay, let's play rock and roll. And they know there's a good chance that it's going to lead somewhere great. And so we jump ahead 1 year to a version that I don't think it was as shocking in its delivery as 8-5-11, but I think in a lot of cases foreshadowed and was as important in terms of Fish's overall development as they were making that great shift back to a reliably experimental rock band. And that is 8/15/2012 from Long Beach. This is 25 minutes, I want to say. This opens the second set. Broke Justin Bieber's mind. He was never the same after this. This is abstraction as a state of being. This is that, holy shit, they can still do it moment. This is, if I'm going to make like a non-Fish musical comparison, this is Fish channeling bands like Stars of the Lid. This is the band realizing, and somewhere in 2011, 2012, they came to this understanding once again that they could hang in a musical space. And if they hung in that musical space, something would happen. And the music that they were playing during that space would intrigue enough people that they wouldn't lose the audience and that they would still throw out these little bits of communication to each other, even when they weren't moving towards a rock peak. And at some point they would figure something out. And from here, you'll hear, the Bill Graham second set from night 3, the St. Louis second set, all across Dix, the Chalk Dust, the Undermine, the Light, the Sand, all of these moments, the Tweezer from MSG, the Disease from MSG, all of these moments where the band is realizing in the moment that just stay, just be in this space. And it's an interesting counter to the Cypress version we talked about, because I think that the one negative that you can say about that is that on the back end they kind of allow for this space but don't really offer a ton of ideas within that. And one of the kind of the touchstones of this shift in jamming in 2012, 2013, the baby's mouth kind of coined this. If you guys remember the blogosphere back in 2012, 2013, this cubist jamming, where you were in a musical space and you threw out an idea, and then they distorted that idea and saw what happened with that idea, and then someone would evolve it to another space, and you kind of had this like cubist style jamming where it wasn't super fluid in a lot of ways. It was more like one idea stopping point, another idea stopping point, and going back to this and listening back to the way that the band was approaching playing rock and roll at this point in time and playing just a jam in general, you just almost hear them in the moment realizing what they can still do and what will help unlock whatever the next phase is. So I'm a huge fan of this. I think that there was no debate about this jam. It had to be on this list. I think it's one of the strongest jams of the 3.0 era, and I think it's one of the strongest jams of this song. I think it has to be here.
Yeah, this is on my list as well. Thinking about like when this was too is really interesting. You know, jamming had started coming back like more consistently that June, and then this is like 2 weeks before the Fuck Your Face show. And this jam, I love this jam. And going back to it just and listening to it a bunch this week, it's so patient. And I think what you're saying, Brian, too, is really true. And it almost to me at times sounds like a Grateful Dead jam, and that it's really spacious and airy and wide open. And I think there's parts of it that, especially at the end, that get really eerie and start to feel really agitated. But it's super compelling. It has a very good ending. And I think the delicate section in the middle is just it's so confident and quiet, and absolutely love this jam. This is definitely one of my favorites.
Yeah, they're starting to figure it out at this point, in
Yeah.
terms of how to put these long jams together. It's really quiet in so many places, which is cool. And it's set to opener. That's huge. Yeah, I think I mean, I definitely think it should be on the list. I think there's some serious like meandering in there, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I think it's like that was my notes. There's like a lot of meandering back and forth, which I think is good, you know, because then they kind of like come back and bring it to kind of a peak, and then there's like some post peak jamming in there. Yeah, it's a lot.
Do you think it works better than the Cypress meandering?
Well, I think there's just so much more going on, but again, maybe
Yeah.
it's because maybe you told me that I need to listen to the soundboard, which that's Big Cypress, which I
You'd never
agree
thought
with.
that before? When I told you, you were
No,
like,
but now
"Wow,
that
that's actually right."
now that you mention it, that does sound like a good idea, and I'd like to do that. But yeah, I mean, it just feels like there's, I don't know, kind of like what we were talking about with 3.0 and 4.0. There are times when they're all like, especially as we're doing this project, I'm realizing that they're all just working together in a way that just sounds so much more interesting and more layered. And I think you hear that a lot here,
Yeah.
even when it's like slow and kind of like patient,
This also, like in this jam, this is connected to some of the big jams of the early era that are not rock and roll. And I think about like the Albany Seven Below and Ghost. Um, I think about the June 3rd, 2011 Down with Disease. These moments in early 3.0 where the band was showing we still have the ability to take this beyond 17 minutes and we're still okay with the unknown. I think one thing you may not be deliberately saying, RJ, but I think you're hinting at, and I agree with, is, and it's a lot easier to say this in hindsight now than in the moment. There were a lot of like online battles of like, Fish is never going to get it back. Yes, they will. This is my 30 seconds of proof that Fish will become Fish again. No, those are 30 seconds are the outliers. Like, I think that they maybe may not have communicated this, but I got to believe it was there. We're not going to just jam for the sake of jamming. And I think that they
Mhm.
knew that there was a period in their history where some really great jams came out of it, but they did jam for the sake of jamming, and they wanted their songs to really dictate who the band was. They wanted there to be a different level of flow and a different level of musicianship from what people had been used to over the previous 10 years. And so it took a while for them to get to a point where they could play a 25-minute long jam and also be comfortable with space, also be comfortable with nothing happening, knowing that within that, they've kind of guided themselves towards melodic communication that was really going to benefit them long term. And I think you get that in this version that elevates it even above rock and roll as a song, as a jam vehicle itself.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense to me. I don't. I feel like there's a lot of letting go in the middle part of this jam. You know, that like they're not trying to do anything, but I feel like part of that is not trying.
Right. And I think it was really hard for them to do at that time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it started to pick up around this time, so you can hear it. It's a good like post of where they were. You know.
And we'd hear, so many jams like this going forward. So this is 3 or 4. So we've got, what is it now? We've got Washington, Jefferson, I guess in order. Roosevelt comes next, and then Lincoln comes afterwards. So Lincoln is the capstone, even though that's out of order and it messes with everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They just found that extra space in there.
They did.
You know.
There's another space. Why don't we do Teddy? He'll get pissed if we don't.
Yeah.
Come out of the grave.
Yeah.
All right. So last version. Do you guys have anything else you want to say about the Long Beach version?
No.
No.
I think you said it all. I'm glad it's on there.
I just remember interviewing Dan for who's Dan Cantor, I think is his last name. The guitar, Justin Bieber's guitarist, who's also a Fish fan, who took Justin to the show, and he talked about how he was so happy that Bieber got a long jam like this during his first show, because it was like the real Fish experience. Like he needed something that was like, wait, when does this song end? All right. So our last version. So this was my late entry. This was for a time my only honorable mention, and then I re-listened to everything and said, you know what? I think ultimately this version says what I feel like needs to be said about rock and roll as a song and as a jam vehicle better than the original version I was going to put on, which was 12/2/2003. And that is 7/12/13 from Jones Beach. This opens one of the best second sets of that summer, which is coming off of one of the worst first sets of that entire year. A first set that was a perfect combination of Sideways Rain at Jones Beach and Fish being like, hey, does anyone want to hear this song? And then they play that song, and then they're like, hey, how about this song next? And it's all songs that people are like, can you just play that the night before I see you guys?
Wait, it sounds like you're talking about the 2009 show from Jones Beach, which is the exact same way. Sideways Rain and a bunch of shit nobody wanted to hear.
It was like that. And then they came out for the second set, and RJ was there, so he can give like an actual like a read on this, because people who are there get it more than people who are listening from like cheap motels in Southeast Asia. But Trey walks out on stage and says, we're practicing safe music up here. And everyone laughs because, they could get electrocuted, and nobody wants them to get electrocuted. And they play rock and roll, which I think is the perfect vibe. It's exactly what I'm talking about with this song. When in doubt, your life was saved by rock and roll. There might be something more than this, but there may not be. It just might be that your life was saved by rock and roll. And they do this thing that I think has happened 3 other times in the song's history. And the other times are 10/31/98, the original version, 12/2/2003, and 8/8/2009, which recommended an 09 jam. What is wrong with you? No, please go and listen to this 23-minute rock and roll that barely breaks out of rock and roll for 23 minutes, but is so worth listening to. This takes those 3 versions and is like, now Fish is in a brand new era as a band, and this song barely gets out of the rock and roll key. It's right there. It is fun. It is gooey. It is clean and clear in a way that 2013 Fish jamming was to like an absolute peak. It's like there's no effects that are used here. Um, this sounds almost like early Beatles in the sense that like let's just strip it down to like the bare parts of what you need to hear us play music. No effects, no weird noises. Let's just like play riffs and then you comment on those riffs and then let's just see where that goes. And it ultimately goes into a 2001, which then goes into a really, really cool second set. But this version is kind of to me like, Lou Reed would pass away about 4 months from here, and by all accounts, he never heard this version of rock and roll. But you would almost imagine he listens to this version is like, okay, that's exactly what I was going for. Like that vibe, that energy, stretched out, um, it is exactly what I was going for. I love this jam. I love the set. That's not the reason I picked it. So, to the people saying that you just pick these songs because you like them, I cut out one of my favorite versions, maybe my personal favorite version of rock and roll ever for this, because I think that this says more about what rock and roll is to Fish, what this song can ultimately mean as a jam vehicle, and then in the setting meeting where Fish was at that point in time at like a very peak period in time, just ahead of the Tahoe Tweezer, ahead of Fall 2013, one of our favorite tours of all time. This just has that entire vibe to it. So curious your guys' thoughts here.
Yeah, I mean, like even dude says here, like there's so much room because so many people left at set break during the show. It was one of the wildest shows I've ever been to. The rain, like people were underneath the main. There's only like really one place in the whole place where you can get out of the rain, which is like the under the balcony area or whatever that thing's
Yeah, it's
called.
like that like cross that like section where all the spinners go, which is like, yeah.
Yeah. So there were
Yeah.
people like crowded in there in the first set. The songs were like, it was a pretty boring set. It was not very inspired. There's a Reba that's kind of weird. Um, there is like a decent David Bowie that ends the set, which gave everyone a little bit of hope. But a lot of people left at set break. A lot of my friends I was with, people were like, "We're out of here," like because it was pouring rain sideways. It was really pretty uncomfortable. For in a lot of ways. The reason that he said we're practicing safe music is because they were putting plastic covers on the piano and on all the wedges.
Oh,
and
at that point.
speakers.
Oh, okay.
So it
Yeah,
was
yeah.
like that. Yeah. So that was the dad joke from Trey. But I feel like you said it well, Brian. Like they just like came out just to let loose, and they were really locked in together in that jam in a way that I think they pick up the pace toward the end and then get into this like blissy jam. The .NET jam chart says that Trey's using the pitch shifter too much. That doesn't really bother me in this at all. I think it's actually, I think it like works really well in the jam itself, but I think it's a great jam and a great way to start the set that was really, really awesome. But yeah, I agree. This was on my list. I think it's worthy.
There's something a special when you see the band in like extreme weather. I always remember those times, especially. I was thinking when you were talking about the plastic I was remembering in Wilmington 2 summers ago during that Oblivion jam when they came out and covered Page. He was actually under the plastic because it was raining so hard. It was so crazy. And then they stopped the show and that was insane. Yeah, it's interesting. I did not have this version on my list. Reba has thoughts about it as well. I love the early peak and then the jam after the peak in this version, but I felt like this version never really. I think it's what you're saying, Brian, about how it stays within rock and roll. And so for me, it just didn't kind of go where I wanted it to go. I think the other version that I had on here, I just find more compelling. But I'm gonna go back and listen to this again. I think I may have missed something.
When I was listening back to it, I had a moment. I was driving home from work and I was listening to it and I had forgotten about there's a moment about like 12 and a half, 13 minutes in where Trey is kind of looping these riffs and Fishman has been playing this very driving beat that's like kind of just like pushing the song towards a peak. And you know, summer 2013, they changed their stage setup so Fishman would be right behind Trey, but like basically on level with
Mhm.
him because Trey wanted to actually hear the drums and he felt like he needed that relationship with Fishman for them to take another step forward from a jamming standpoint. I think this jam is a perfect example of that move because you can hear Fishman. Maybe it's a look, maybe it's just like a better angle to hear Trey and see what he's doing. Fishman immediately adjusts and he shifts into what Trey is doing. And then for the last 6 minutes, there's a lot of it's a little subtle. It's not like as deliberate as say like the Gorge version from 2 years earlier, but there's a lot of like this yes and jamming. And the fact
Mhm.
that it happens with nearly zero effects. You're absolutely right. There's the pitch shifter in there. That's something that everybody complained about during the first 4 or 5 years. And I'm on the exact same page with you, RJ. I think it really works here. I don't
Yeah.
think it sounds annoying. I don't think it takes away. I think it works with like the kind of wave like jam that's happening as we're going forward. But this reminds me almost of like another 2013 jam, the Carini from Atlantic City, that if you listen to that, like Trey's almost taken every effect off, and you're just hearing the pure guitar for like 4 or 5 minutes there, and you got this sense during that year that the band was trying to just say, "How do we break things down to as basic a level as possible, but we are a stronger band than we were 4 years earlier when we came back." And you contrast that with today where, like, every jam has layers and layers of weird sounds and synths and effects on it. It's it's a very different version of Fish that I think I'll be curious to hear what you had on it instead of this, and if it was the reasons I almost had a certain jam on instead of this versus when I came around, right before this and started chiseling into stone, and there's no way to go back now.
Nope, no
There
way to go
isn't.
back. I support
I
you.
I think that the picking at the it's an interesting point about the stage setup because I think I mentioned this just briefly, but like they pick up the pace toward the end before that like peak, and it's so it's like it's great, has so high energy, but they like Fishman just keeps it going, and then Trey kind of gets onto that, and I mean it's a really cool peak. But also I think he listening to it in the context of this like crazy, like you said, crazy weather event. Yeah, it's good. Um, well, the only thing that I would have different, Brian, I think I would not do the 12 Gorge, or sorry, not do the 12 Long Beach version. I would do the Cypress, the 11 Gorge, the 7213, and then the one that I would put on is the 8809 at the Gorge. And I think like the whole time I was like, is this really like could I really have a 2009 jam?
I know you it
But
almost feels like wrong in your soul.
I know of at least one other 2009 jam that will be on my Mount Rushmore list and probably others, but maybe there are several, but I know one for sure that I don't know, maybe that's like 2029, but I think that the 8809 jam is like Page's keys are so great throughout the jam. They sound really inspired, but also like really patient. And for early 3.0, the Trey playing on this is really great. There's like a riff that it's still stuck in my head. And then he gets to this like soaring solo to close. It's a really, really awesome jam. I think that is something I wouldn't probably have remembered, like offhand, but
Mhm.
going back to it, I'm like, this has to be there. Like it just made me happy, and being happy is the whole point of this whole endeavor. So that's the one that I would put on, and I guess I would take off the 2012. For all the reasons that you guys pointed out. I think it's noteworthy and really good. I think the 2011 version from the Gorge, because it's so different and dark and weird, like I think that would go on there over the 2012 version. But so that's where I landed.
Yeah, that '09 version is right after the light we talked about last week that didn't make Mount Rushmore, but was still an important jam, and I love the echoing with the effects in this one, and that trilling peak is just it builds so nicely, and then they're saying they're quoting it was all right, like, in the peak. It's really fun. It's cool.
Megan,
That
go ahead, Brian. Sorry.
well, I had the same debate that you did, and I commend you for being as brave as you are by picking an '09 version. I don't think that I think there's a couple great '09 jams that could make the case for other songs. Maybe. I
I'm
love
traumatized by that year.
that 8809 version. I mean, that year was total joy for Fish. Even though you knew it was a level below, just the fact that they were back. But that version, like that riff, that like "Bep, bep, ba-dip, bip, ba-dip, bip, ba-dip, ba-dip, bip," and like
Yeah.
those are ideas that Trey was not having throughout various jams in 2009. If you look at the shows around that Gorge run, it really makes it this like isolated experience in Fish history at that point in time. Those two shows, any '09 skeptic, anyone who's like who shits on it, go back and listen to those two shows. There's so much across there, and 8809 is just as chock full of ideas as 87 was. Um, I had something to say, and then I said something else, and so now I've lost it. So I mean, it's going to have to come back to me here, Meg. You're going to have to take it now.
The only
Okay,
Megan,
sure,
before
well.
you go,
Oh, I remember it. Sorry.
Ah.
Sorry. I totally remember it. So because you mentioned, Meg, that they were singing "It's All Right" at the end. There's never been any information about this released by the band, but this was always um the conspiracy online. You know, in '09, 10, 11, even into 12, you would get a cover song and then Gorge Jam or Alpine Jam or Cincinnati
Mhm.
Jam. And so like you'd have these big jams in two very specific songs, Drowned and Rock and Roll. They jammed all the time. And you could never see on paper that you actually had a jam. So it just looked like 5-minute version followed by 7-minute jam, 5-minute version followed by 11-minute jam. And it really made the experience of like seeing a Fish show come on paper feel it like diluted it because it was just like, well,
Yeah.
shit, like they're just not jamming at all. This was one of the first versions to actually cross 20 minutes. I think this was the first 20-minute jam. Well, they did a Disease at Shoreline, and then they did Disease in never mind. There were others, but this was the first cover version of it. And the conspiracy was because Page started singing the chorus at the end, they couldn't cut it. They had to like release it as a full 23-minute long jam. So for us jam heads that wanted to see 20-minute long tracks, which is a very niche population in the Fish community, I understand, but like I'm one of these people. Holy crap, seeing on live Fish that this said 23 minutes, it filled you with so much joy.
Brian, thank you for that context. Megan, I just before you, I want to hear
Jam heads.
yours, but I just want to say in that jam, there's a part which Brian kind of vocalized the Trey riff, but like Paige is on the clav and Trey is playing this riff, and it like almost sounds like they're like, they're what 4 months into coming back or whatever, a few months, and it almost sounds like they're like, oh yeah, we can like do this. We can like I can listen to what you're doing, and then I can do it differently slightly, and then we can move it forward at the same time. It's really it feels very like notable to me, but maybe I'm sure there are others from that year, like you mentioned, Brian, but it feels very notable that this is like them realizing that
Mhm.
they can listen to each other and jam again.
There are others, but they were few and far between. So when they happened, you were like, what the fuck? This band can still do it.
Yeah. All right, Megan, what do you got?
Okay, so my list came together very quickly and easily and never wavered. And it was 99 Cypress. It was 12/3, 2003 from Boston. It was The Gorge from 11. And it was Long Beach from 2012. And it just, the whole time, just made sense to me. I think having this Boston show from 2003, I don't know. I'm so into 2003 right now. I think ever since we did 25 tours, every time I hear something from 2003, I'm like, fuck, why is this so good? But I think this show especially is so sentimental because it was the 20th anniversary of the first Fish show. You've got this video during set break that they come out and play this long video of all these moments of the band. And then they open the second set with this rock and roll, which is like a comment on rock and roll saving your life. And to me, it's so just absolutely heart-wrenching that they would do that. To me, it's just so meaningful. And this jam is like the journey through like the 2003 growly swagger you were talking about that, Brian. I just cannot get enough of that, into this super quiet, cool, gooey exploration, and how they find melody out of that. And then it ends in this really rocking way into Weekapog. This is a perfect jam to me. And I love it. And I'm shocked it wasn't on your list, but it makes sense now. I get it. But that was my list the whole time. And it's felt very much like established in a way that none of the other weeks have. Like every other week I've been like hemming and hawing right into the end, and this one really came together right away.
This is a really great jam. I saw the 3 shows before this in
Oh, wow.
late 03, and then not this. They were all like kind of not good shows. Like in the grand scheme of things. Like that run kind of sucked, but did not go to Boston for this 4th one. But this is a really great jam. Page with like the sirens and all, I mean everything, the blues riff. It's all like taking pieces of other 2003 jams, you know, sound wise. But yeah, it's a good version.
I love it.
The chords that Trey finds, and the way he just like repeats them and builds them over and over and over again. There's not a ton like that outside of like Harry Hood. Like it is so joyful. And I think I didn't think about that in the sense of this coming right after the 20th anniversary video, but I think that's great context. Amazing work, Meg. You know, just like this song was played a ton during 2003, and there were some great versions like off of our long list. I took off the It Rock and Roll, which I highly recommend people checking out. That's a great version. The version for Miami isn't like thrilling, but it's good enough in the way that it kicks off a really cool segue second set. But this version, it broke my heart to take it off. I felt like I needed to focus on what does rock and roll mean in Phish history versus just versions I absolutely love. And I think I'll probably wrestle with this one for a long time. It's not it wasn't a fun move. I don't try to take away 2003 love very easily. So, you know, when I have a chance to elevate 2003, I do everything I can, and it is what it is, you know.
Yeah, we have to make hard choices.
I just want to note that there are some fan responses here. Yes, same actually. I think actually same.
It's one of the worst.
We should do that. Mount Rushmore.
Yeah.
We'll do a draft of the worst shows we've ever seen.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Okay, so the fans had 12/31/99, 8/5/11, 8/15/12, and 8/3/13, which we haven't talked about yet.
Oh yeah, that was my honorable mention. That's my honorable mention.
Can I just address a listener comment, which was, how did you leave the 8/21/15 Magnaball off the list? It's not on the jam chart, is one reason, and I don't know any others.
It's a good version. I think it's one of those like the sum is greater than the parts. That's an excellent set of Phish that has an awesome Ghost in it, an awesome Chalk Dust Torture. The rock and roll is good. I think it is in the tier personally with I'm just going to do one of RJ's favorite things here, and I'm going to list dates.
Good.
It's there
right,
with
I'll be back in a few minutes.
11/21/09, 6/26/10, 6/19/10, 10/22/10, 6/7/11, 6/17/11, and 12/28/11 as like really solid versions that like if you get that at a show, you're in a good space. But I don't think it was ever going to be a Mount Rushmore version personally.
Every
Megan,
single episode we do in Mount Rushmore, someone is like, but Magnaball, like every single episode. I hope it happens for every episode the whole time. It's just so good.
You know what they don't say?
So hard. Yeah.
You know what they don't say?
Yeah.
I don't even.
Are we gonna do a what's going through your mind draft? Because then we'd get to say Mondegreen, yes.
If we are still doing this when what's going through your mind hits 50 versions, 50? Which I think probably will happen by the end of next year. I think that we're going to probably get, I think summer 2025 is going to be like every other show. Trey's like, you want to play what's going through your mind again?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's play that again.
Yep, that's basically that's how it works. I just want to say real quick, we got a nice note in the voting comments, which is a whole new thing from a listener listening from China,
No
and just
way.
saying his wife is from Russia and he's from the States. They met in Korea, married in Thailand, live in China, and still one of his long-standing dreams to get her to a show. She appreciates it, but doesn't fully understand the drive we have to listen and study to the music. And he wants to get her to a show, but also says that he loves what we do and think this project is a great way to understand the evolution of some of the music. Keep sharing the groove. So thank you for sending that.
That is
Um,
awesome.
That's amazing.
EV Dude had 1231.99, 12203, 8511, and 8512.
So my list.
1512.
Yep. Or sorry, yeah, 81512.
Nice, EV Dude.
Same. Bryce had the same list as EV Dude. Craig Knowlton had 1231.99, 8512, 81512, 71213, and 8313. So heavy, both 2013 versions. Jeremy had 12203, 8809, 81512, and 8313. So this is kind of like a little bit all over the place about these, but I have to read Forbin 777's 1231.99, 8511, 81512, and 71213. We kind of did it, but Megan, you didn't talk about we didn't talk about A313. Do you want to talk about it quickly, or are we or is it just
Yeah,
an
I can do it
honorable
quickly.
mention?
I mean, this was my honorable mention. I love this jam. It's got the early peak, and then it goes into that space funk section that's so fun, and it gets really quiet, and Paige on the piano is just but they're still playing the space effects, but Paige is on the piano, and somehow it works. It's just really interesting, and it has that super slow, optimistic climb that never really, like, truly peaks, but still works. I really liked this version a lot.
Bill Graham 13 kind of gets overlooked because of the Tahoe Tweezer, but 8213 is an outstanding complete show. 8313 has this great rock and roll, and then 8413, friend of the pod, Craig Hillwig, has always talked about as one of the strongest 3.0 shows. There's nary a flub throughout that show. It's so much energy, excellent song selection. It is Fish at a very, very high level, at a kind of similar to what I was talking about with like the second set of 7, 12, 13. You go back and listen to some of those 2013 shows, and man, you might not get the depth of jamming that you're looking for now, but you just get like a peak band that just knew how to play together.
Yeah, that third night, second set, the Energy, Runaway Jim combo.
The light.
Yeah, the light. Yeah, it's really awesome. Okay, so we have a different kind of thing happening next week.
Yeah,
Brian.
baby. Yeah, baby.
Brian, what are we doing next week? And can we share some kind of preview with our fans and friends?
100%. We're going back to Draftland, baby. Come on. You guys ready for this?
I don't know. Are you ready, Brian?
I'm nearly finished with my preparation. I'm so totally ready.
I just
well, that's, I'm sure that there are people out there that want you to win, so they'll probably give you the best picks,
Oh,
so
man.
just listen to your friends,
He's not ready.
Yep. No, I'm ready. So what we are doing is I don't know why someone deleted this. Maybe I did. I will add this back here, but we're going to preview the West Coast tour that is coming up here in the next couple of weeks. And by doing that, we are doing a draft. We are doing a West Coast shows draft. We have 6 categories here. And a little bit different than what we've done in the past. We will have a Southern California category, a Northern California category, an Oregon category, a Washington category, and then a 1.0 wild card category and a 2.0 to 4.0 wild card category. So you, the hosts, when you get through all of you can do it whenever, if you want to claim a show and just be like, I got enough confidence that there's enough great shows from whatever region of the West Coast, I'm just going to slam home my 1.0 wild card. You're able to do that, but we're going to draft 6 shows each, from Southern California, Northern California, Oregon, Washington, and then a 1.0 West Coast, and a 2.0 to 4.0. Should be really fun. West Coast fish is really wild. I've been listening to a ton of it over the last couple of days. When they get into really cool spaces, they get into really cool spaces. We will probably release our list before the episode so that you guys can all prepare.
Yeah,
It's
I'm actually going to
live
do
and
that.
ready.
I'm going to do
Yeah.
that right now. I'm going to put a PDF because it's too hard to do with a screenshot.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have a PDF that's going to be at osirispod.com/draft. So if you go there, if you're watching live, it's not going to work. But if you're listening or you go back in like 5 minutes, it'll work. So the list will be there, and it's a PDF, and it'll have all the categories and the possibility. You could even print that PDF and follow along at home or do your own picks.
A lot of options.
A lot of options.
We're all about the options. I'm stoked. It'll be our first draft since the highly contentious studio albums draft that almost broke the podcast in half. But I'm excited about it. I think drafts are great for content development. They're great for sharing ideas, sharing your own personal tastes, your own personal shows, jams, whatnot that you love. It's also there for stealing things from other people. And
I
You
thought
know
you
what
were
it's
gonna
not
say-
good
Where we
for?
go.
You know what it's not good for? Our friendship.
I
That's
thought you were
what
going
it's
to say
not good
friendship.
for.
I thought we were going to say
Yeah,
friendship is
it's
the point.
not good for our friendship. But this is the thing I was thinking about.
I
And I was
think our
talking to
friendship has deepened through
You
Mm.
do?
conflict. Okay, I think
Mm,
you
it's
would
interesting.
agree with that too.
Oh, okay. Well, one thing I will say, if we've been able to rupture and repair, let's say that in
Wow.
therapy words.
Wow.
I felt no rupture.
That's not true, Brian. That's a lie. That's not. You were like
Love
so
it.
mad. You were accusing people of being moles, so you were definitely like.
I'm
looked
just here
past.
for the content, baby. I'm just here to.
That's
It's
what
true.
you say.
I want
Okay, so
people to
right.
listen to our podcast, engage with our podcast, have a good time with our podcast. I have a good time
Mm.
with it. Do you have a good time with it? I don't know.
I have an amazing time with it. I'm able to be fine if I lose. I'm actually like not a sore loser at all. But what I will say is that I think this week or next week, I should say, is actually a little bit more about personal taste because there's so many great shows to choose from. Where
Yeah.
I think some of the tighter drafts, like the studio album draft or the best years, there's clear winners in each category. But I think for this, it's a little more open-ended. So I think we'll be able to maintain our friendship in a more peaceable manner, Brian. I hope so. I don't have a list of your
Quote.
favorite shows, but I'm sure I will upset you at some point when I choose a show that's good that you own.
To quote the great Hannah Hidalgo, I hate to lose more than I love to win. And that's just the way it goes. It's just the way it goes.
I don't know who that is, but it's a good quote.
It's
All
another
right.
sport reference, but you know, we'll get there. We'll get there.
We're gonna just go to osirispod.com/draft and you can follow along from home. Okay. We'll see you
RJ's
next
just like
week.
get out of here.
We're
Get out of
already-
here,
we
guys.
did it.
Come on. What is going on?
We did it. I'm
I
just
can't
saying we
wait.
did it.
I can't wait.
We did it. It's
I'm
gonna be great.
excited.
Thanks
can't
everybody
wait.
thanks for coming on this draft adventure with us. Go back to some of those rock and roll versions if you haven't already. Anything else, guys?
Nope. I
All
can't
right.
wait. See everybody next week.
See you
Shout
next
out
week.
VT to boot here. Sounds like MJ. Anyway, you shake the Hidalgo. That's it. That's it, my dude. You got it.
That's it. Goodbye.